Welcome to Heartbreak and Hope with Pat Barbarito, the show that explores how to build up or break down any relationship with confidence, clarity, and compassion. Joining us today is Dr. Duana Welch. You already know Duana from our previous episode discussing the science of love. Dr. Welch uses science to help you find and keep the love of your life. She's the author of Love Factually, 10 Proven Steps from I Wish to I Do, and that book has been recently revised and updated and is a must read. She's a coach known for using social science to solve real-life relationship issues, and she's got lots of great sayings. One of my favorite is, human nature hasn't changed, dating has. So today we're going to talk about how dating has changed, and we're going to discuss how to find love online. During our last episode, we talked about the fact that people are uncomfortable going online to find love. And there's a lot of good reasons for that. When Duane and I were preparing for today and talking about this episode, it occurred to both of us that people take directions from professionals for all kinds of things. You go to the doctor, you're sick, you get prescribed medicine or tests, you follow the directions. You don't understand them necessarily. If you have a legal issue or a tax issue, you go to a professional and you do what they say, not necessarily understanding it. And if your car breaks down, you go to a mechanic, they tell you what to do. And for the most part, you say, okay, if that's what it costs, then I'll follow your directions. But what fascinates me is that people don't do that when it comes to healing their heart or finding love. They don't take direction from a professional. We invest in meeting somebody with superficial things. We buy new clothes for a date. We put on makeup, maybe get a little Botox. We spend thousands of dollars on matchmakers who really just put us together and don't understand who we are. But we don't invest in a professional that will give us the tools to find a heart connection. In any event, I've come to the conclusion sometimes you just got to follow directions. And I believe love will happen. More importantly, Dr. Welch knows how to tell us that'll happen. Duana, what is the first thing we do to get mentally prepared to how to find love online?
You know, for a lot of people, it's just overcoming their hesitations about what they believe about online dating. I think people in their 20s, 30s, maybe even partway up into their 40s now, there's no stigma about meeting online anymore. But when you get above that age point, a lot of people still feel like there's a stigma. There isn't. That's all made up. It doesn't exist anymore. It's a perfectly legitimate way to meet. It's rapidly supplanting the former most common way to meet, which was through friends and family. And there's research that shows that at least if you use a site that gives a lot of information about you, not just a picture and a few words, but a lot of information, that the marriages that are formed from such sites are slightly happier than the marriages formed through friends and family. Isn't that interesting?
The mental preparation, I believe, is significant, particularly for people over a certain age. I'm in my 60s. There's something uncomfortable about saying I went shopping for love. Why is that we feel embarrassed about that, or we don't want to tell people how we met? I mean, I know lots of people have met online and they come up with another story. Why is it you think that people of a certain age feel uncomfortable with that?
That's so funny. I've never come up with another story. I'm proud of having met my person online, but I do hear this. You know, I really think that, again, it goes back to the idea of stigma, and it also goes back to cultural messaging that love is just supposed to magically happen and we shouldn't have to work at it. People feel like losers if they had to put in special effort to find a partner. But, you know, finding the right romantic partner, the decision that impacts our health, our wealth, our longevity, the quality of our sex life, the amount of sex we have, even our children's destinies, more than any other decision we make, far more than our career does. We put a lot of effort into preparing for our career. Some of us, you know, I was in school till I was basically almost 30, and we just expect love to happen. And that's kind of backwards. I'm not saying don't prepare for your career. I mean, I have a PhD and a master's and a bachelor's. So obviously I believe in preparing for your career. But additionally, we need to really take it seriously that love requires a series of planned actions. If you want intentional results, plan intentionally. Don't let things happen to you. Make them happen.
You know, I know for myself, the idea of being online, there's an embarrassment that people might see you and what you want and your vulnerability. I mean, I'm a divorce lawyer, so my hesitation has always been, and I've talked about this, I don't want people to know I want to meet somebody. I want them to kind of think I can figure it all out. So I've always felt embarrassed, ashamed to admit that my heart is lonely. And I think you probably find that with other people of a certain age.
Actually, I find that with people of all ages.
You do.
Yeah, we are taught in the United States, especially, there are some cultures that are more individualistic than others, meaning some cultures put more emphasis on making it on your own without anybody's help. And of all cultures that have ever been studied, the United States is at the top of that. So admitting you're lonely is like saying, well, I'm not so much of an individualist, but I will tell you, science shows that being lonely is as big a problem for your health as smoking a pack a day. It's a big health problem. So I understand people are hesitant to admit that they are lonely. And what I would say about that is, you admit it when you're looking for work.
You admit it when you need medical advice. You admit it when you have a professional question to ask anybody. But isn't it amazing how we can't admit to the world that we're looking for a partner? You feel like, well, how come I didn't find one? What's wrong with me? I have to go out there in the market and shop for it. There is a stigma, and getting mentally ready to do this online dating is a significant part of the process. So how do you address that when somebody comes to you for coaching? How do you get them mentally ready?
Well, one of the things I do is I don't ask anybody to do anything I haven't done myself. And, it's worked very well for me. For example, I have a number of high profile individuals who come to me and say that they don't want to be outed online. They're going to be so embarrassed if somebody sees them from their profession, or maybe a client of theirs sees them, and they're worried that they're going to look like losers for being online, just like everybody else. And what I say is, well, they're online too. If anything, it's a validation of their position. And, Pat, I was online a little over a year ago, and I found my person in 7 days. Now, my process, it absolutely works. It doesn't always bring somebody in 7 days. I mean, it's not always the case that somebody's there who's appropriate.
But what you've said in the past is it does teach you who you don't want to be with.
Well, it definitely does. And so what I tell my clients is, look at the job that I have. My picture is everywhere. My books are all over the world in 5 languages. And the second anybody Googles me, they're going to find 4 days of podcasts, 4 continuous days of podcasts. So I'm highly identifiable. And then on top of it, if they find me, a lot of people might be intimidated by that. I just encourage people to understand, if I could do it, you can do it. You really can. The right people are not going to be put off by this. You want to get rid of the wrong people quickly anyway. This is a good way to do it.
That. That's a great way to look at it. The right people won't be put off. So once you get mentally prepared, we all know about the famous profile. You have to write a profile. How the heck do you write a profile that captures who you are in a few paragraphs? Because it's critical to identify what you're looking for. How do you do that?
Well, you don't. That's the short answer. And when I say you don't, I mean 2 things. Number one, if you can, hiring a professional to do this for you can really help. And the second thing is, you don't, because you don't write about you. You write about them. What I mean by that is, go online at any site. Go to Match, go to OkCupid, go to Tinder, go to Bumble, go to Hinge, whatever app or site you're using, and look at how people deal with the profile section. They write about themselves. You know what? People's eyes glaze over. What people are really interested in is them. What you need to do is present a profile that is about your future partner, not about you. The irony is, by presenting a profile about your future partner, you are also presenting information about you, because I know for a fact from doing this work and from research that what people ask for is who they are.
What do you mean? Give me some more examples of that, the nuts and bolts of that.
Yeah, the nuts and bolts of this involve, first of all, writing down a list of everything you have to have and everything you'd like to have. I call them must-haves and wants. And must-haves are exactly that. They're the things that, if any of these things were lacking, even if the person was otherwise perfect, if even one must-have was lacking, it's a deal buster. You just can't go forward with the relationship. So in other words, the must-haves portion of your list is not pass-fail. It's not like, if they get 70%, good enough. It has to be 100% on the must-haves, or you're going to be unhappy. That's why it's a must-have.
How does one incorporate that into a profile on a dating site?
Well, what you do is you write out your must-haves and your wants, and then you write out a profile that describes this person in terms of your must-haves. I can give you an example. I mean,
Please do.
obviously I wrote my own ad, and unlike other people's ads, I have permission to share mine because I have permission from me. So I've got it right here on my desk. I'll just read you a little bit of it, and this will give you an
Please
idea.
do.
So I'm going to tell you some of the things that were on my list. I wanted somebody who loves kissing. That's an important thing to me.
Loves kissing.
Loves kissing. I wanted somebody who takes the traditional lead in courtship for reasons that anybody who reads my books will know. It's not because I'm a traditionalist. I've never changed my name. I've got a PhD and I cut my own hair. I'm not a traditionalist, but
No, you're not. And that's why we love you. But go ahead.
But I know that marriage is better for us than cohabiting emotionally, in terms of our health, our wealth, our safety, everything. I know that it's better for us. I know that courtship that happens where if you're heterosexual, the guy takes the lead works out better than if the couple shares it 50-50.
That sounds so old fashioned to me, Duana. I mean, I marched, burned my bra, did all the stuff in the 70s. Are you telling me now I've got to wait for some guy to pursue me?
You don't have to. You can do anything you want.
Well, I don't want to pursue anybody because I feel like at this point in my life, I want to be pursued. But I think it sounds sort of old fashioned that you put that on your list, if I may challenge you, my friend.
You absolutely may challenge me, and I'm glad you're doing it because I know
Okay.
everybody else out there is thinking, what? Why would
What's
she
with
say
this
that?
woman? Right.
Yeah, well, it's not what's with me, it's what's with science. So yesterday I was standing out in my front yard and I bought my house from a friend, and my friend walked past and she was saying, "So are you going to live together with your boyfriend before you get married?" And I said, "No." And she goes, "Wow, that's kind of old fashioned." And I said, "It's not old fashioned, it's what works." I'm an empiricist. I go with what works for most people most of the time, which is what science is, by the way. Social science is what we know for sure works for most people most of the time. It gives best projected outcomes. That's what I do. And so what I know for sure is when things come easily to men, men do not value those things or those people.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there. We're going to talk about sex because what you've written in your books is that you should not have sexual intercourse until you are in a committed relationship. At least you didn't say wait until you get married. So maybe we've progressed. But what is that about? Again, have we gone that far back that we can't choose when to have sex?
You can have sex whenever you want to. My caveat is you should never have sex you don't want to have. I was recently talking to someone who said to me, I go online and everybody expects sex by the fourth date, if not even sooner. It's having sex with a stranger.
Well, you say you could have sex whenever you want, but what you also say is if you want a long-term committed relationship, science shows you should wait to have sexual intercourse until you have made that decision to be exclusive. What is the science that gives credibility to that recommendation?
You're absolutely right. The second half of you can have sex whenever you want, and also don't have sex ever that you don't want to have. I don't care what your reason is. If you don't want to have it, don't. That's part of being a liberated woman is you can say no. No is a complete sentence. You don't.
And men could say no too. I'm not so sure the same pressure doesn't apply to them, by the way.
Oh, men have a lot of pressure to never say no. People ask them if they
I agree.
are gay. They ask them if they have erectile difficulties. And I actually have a script in my new edition of Love Factually. I have a script for men dealing with that issue.
And I think particularly older men, men of a certain age, are less anxious to just have sex. They do want to have a relationship. But is there some chemical connection that happens when one is having intercourse versus just sort of, making out on the couch?
Yeah, so that's where we're going with all this. People need a substance called dopamine in order to fall in love. And our brain produces this chemical. Men cannot fall in love without a sustained rise in dopamine. In fact, every controlled substance out there, when you go to the pharmacy and they say that's a controlled substance, you have to have a specific prescription, you have to hand carry it in and all this stuff. That's because it hooks into the same receptors in the brain that dopamine works on. So men's dopamine levels rise when they are courting a woman. That's part of the reason you want them to be pursuing you is it raises their dopamine levels. Their dopamine levels tend to fall if they have sex before they're in love. So I'm going to repeat that. Their dopamine levels tend to fall if they have sex before they are in love.
That's a pretty significant statement.
Yeah. So what we know for sure is when men get in a relationship and they are committed and in love, they tend to stay in love. That's when it's emotionally safe for a woman to go there. And I am never going to tell women, do not have sex. What I'm going to say is, if you want a long-term relationship and you are not willing to risk someone walking away from you in confusion because he was into you and now he's not, and even he doesn't know why, I urge you to wait for 3 things before you have sex. You want a long-term relationship with someone madly in love with you, I urge you to wait until he has asked you to be exclusive, he has told you he loves you, and you can tell from his behavior that it is true. And there is a fourth thing: you want to.
And I look at it a little differently also. Any women I've spoken with, and I know my own experience is, once you have sexual intercourse with a man, you have a tendency to be more attached. I don't know if there's science behind that, but I know that when you have sexual intercourse or a sexual relationship with a man that you're in love with, you are freer to be more sexual. And I think the sexual experience is enhanced.
There's a lot of science behind that, actually. And a famous study by Townshend showed that even among really young women who were in a casual sex friends with benefits situation, in other words, everyone in this study is a 20-something young woman or man who is in a friends with benefits situation right now. And Townshend asked them, are you good for each other? And men and women both said, no, that's why we're friends with benefit. We're not good for each other in any other way. And then Townshend said, on a 1 to 5 scale, or whatever the scale was, how emotionally attached are you to this person? So there are two questions of interest here. One is, how emotionally attached should you be? And everybody's acknowledging, men and women, well, we shouldn't be. We're not right for each other. But then when he says, okay, how attached are you getting? 75% of men they said, I'm not attached at all. Now that does leave a hefty 25% who did get attached, but the odds are not in your favor if you just have sex right out the gate, is what I'm saying here. What was fascinating about this study is 75% of young women said the exact opposite. They said, I know he's not right for me, but I can't help getting attached. And I'll tell you why that is. Yet another study showed that most of what is in semen is not sperm. More than 95% of it is what I call love junk. It is dopamine. It is oxytocin. It is a number of other chemicals that their job is to hook you on this person. And these substances are very easily absorbed through the vaginal walls. This is a reason why yet another study by Gordon Gallup Jr. showed that women who have sex without using a condom, if they're having sex at least once a week, they're getting the same benefit emotionally as taking an antidepressant.
I think that information is going to clear up a lot of mystery for women who sort of wonder, why am I getting attached? I think that's really important information to get out there because, there's not a woman I know who doesn't say, why am I attached to this person if they haven't thought it through? I mean, I look at things very differently at 65 than I did at 25, 30, 35, but I think that's really profound information. And I hope that listeners hear it and understand themselves and take responsibility for their own actions.
If I can interrupt, I just want to make clear one more thing. I'm not sure I really made this clear. Men are not wanton cads who want to use women and throw them away.
No.
Are there men like that? Yes, there are. But what's much more common is a man who sincerely is looking for a partner who has sex right away. And then he thinks, oh, I thought I was into her. Now I'm not. I'm confused. It is evolution's way of protecting men from raising children who aren't their own is what it is.
Oh, I love that.
That's what it is. I mean, women, when we have a child, it's a slam dunk. We know whose baby that is. I could have had sex 5 years ago with 100 different men. I didn't, but I could have. And I would. And if I'd gotten pregnant, I would have known whose baby it was. It's mine. Our mating psychology comes from a time when there were not paternity tests. Men at an emotional level, when they choose one woman, they are gambling that when he's at work, when you're on a business trip, when you're with your girlfriends on a girls' weekend, that you really are doing what you said and you're not having sex with someone else and putting his genetic line at risk. In the ancient past, there may have been men who were devil-may-care with this, but they are not our ancestors. They're part of human history, but not part of human ancestry. By definition, if you don't cast your genes forward, the way that you think doesn't get cast forward. That's a genetic phenomenon. So today, men have physical protections against committing to she who will cheat on him. And one of those physical protections is this super sperm. Men have more sperm per ejaculate than any other mammal. There's some argument whether men have sperm that actually exist not for the purpose of impregnating a woman, but to strangle other men's sperm in the reproductive tract. Men also have sperm that's full of love junk to attach a woman. None of this is conscious. What I'm saying is our mating psychology has physical and emotional mechanisms to protect men from unwittingly raising somebody else's kids. They can consciously raise somebody else's kids, but from unwittingly doing so. And it has protections to keep women bonded to the guy. It is to a man's advantage if we are bonded to him against our will very quickly, because then his genes get forward and we're tied to him.
And I want to make it clear, this isn't an intentional or not a malicious or a mean thing that anybody's doing. It's just the mating cycle and how things unfold. So we're talking about all this, and it's all part of the mental preparation. And I think this is very important for people to understand, so you know what you're walking into. We talked a little bit about the profile. One of the questions people ask all the time is, what pictures do I use? And from what I know, I've been told about other women's sites. Men who have been on dates with say that women sometimes use these really provocative photos or photos that are from 20 years ago. How do you guide somebody as to choose the pictures that they put on their site? What's appropriate? What's not?
One of my favorite things is writing somebody's profile right in front of them. So I have their buy-in and helping them make that list, writing their profile for and with them, and then helping them to know what the parameters are for photos and then putting those photos in the right order. So
what are the parameters for photos?
Well, one of the things, it's funny. So as you know, I just had a new edition of Love Factually come out. And the first edition just says, put up some good photos. Oh my, I did not know when I wrote the first edition.
Well, it was how many years ago? I mean, things have changed.
It was 7 years ago. But the fact of the matter is, yes, things have changed. But human nature didn't change, as you know. I say that.
Dating has.
What people are doing is they're putting up photos that they don't really seem to have much awareness of how those photos will be viewed. So let's start with the provocative photo. There is a scientist called Carrie Getz. Dr. Getz does research on sexual predators. And she finds that they look for very specific appearances in women. They look, for example, at women who are not wearing very much clothing, or the clothing is very tight or very revealing. When you put those pictures online, you will get more attention from sexual predators. What I want you to do instead is put pictures that show that you have a waist, that a waist exists, because men are attracted to that. If you are a heterosexual woman, put pictures up that show that you have a waist, but don't make things overly tight or revealing. And make sure that, in addition, the background is uncluttered and attractive. No bathroom selfies, ever. No pictures of you that you think are really good, but they have your ex cropped out of them. No pictures of you that have any other person in the picture. Unless you're a guy. If you're a guy, you could have pictures of you with like your grandkids and a little note on their picture, me and my grandkids, because yet other experiments show that women are more attracted to men showing nurturing toward a child than they are to men not shown nurturing a child, but the effect is reversed for women. In other words, if a woman puts up a picture of herself nurturing a child, men are like, they're not that into it. You need to be on your own in these pictures. It needs to be a good picture of you. You need to be looking directly into the camera and smiling. And I don't mean just showing your teeth. I mean an eye-crinkling smile, a real smile, the kind of smile that you would give to somebody that you love. Think about somebody that you love, that you adore, when you have your pictures taken. And I want your first 2 or 3 shots to be headshots. There's a science reason for that too. We know from experiments, again, experiments show cause effect. They're not merely this happens and this is related to it. They show if X, then Y. If you do this, this does happen. What these experiments show is that men who are in short-term mating mode would rather, if they're forced to choose between looking at women's bodies or women's faces, they're looking at the body. You want to get rid of these men. Again, people who are interacting with my work are people who want a long-term partnership. If somebody wants a short-term partnership, I want to make it clear, I'm not opposed to that. If you want to just go and get laid, I'm not opposed to that. People who hire me, they want a long-term relationship, which means get rid of the people who don't want what you want. And one of the ways to do that is have your first 2 to 3 pictures, and I want you to use 7 pictures. Have the first 2 to 3 pictures be close in headshots that show your smiling, lovely face, smiling and looking directly in the camera, because, yet another science fact, men tend to overperceive women's interest rather than underperceive it. They think we're more interested than we are, and how they tell that is we make eye contact and we smile. So leverage that in your online photos. Be looking straight into the lens, which is into their eyes from the user standpoint, and be smiling, a genuine eye-crinkling smile. But don't put the best picture that you have. Don't go to some place that takes a picture of you that when the person sees you, you're not going to look that good.
So now we're mentally prepared. The profile has been written about them, not you. We have an idea of the pictures to use. I realize this is a long coaching process. It doesn't just happen. What happens when somebody reaches out to you? Do you respond? How do you know how to respond? Do you reach out to them? How do you screen out people that you want to pursue, or you want them to pursue them? You want them to pursue you. How do we do that?
Remember earlier when we talked about sex? And I said young men and young women have a very different way of looking at kind of hookup sex. Young women get more attached. I believe, and I don't know studies on this, I believe that that phenomenon gets exacerbated with age. I think that there are fewer and fewer women who can be emotionally detached, but also fewer and fewer men who can remain emotionally detached.
I absolutely agree with you. I will tell you from my point of view, men I have found really want a long-term relationship or think they want one. I think this idea that men are just looking to get laid really diminishes with age. I agree with you.
Yeah, research in gerontology shows, because there's sexuality research in gerontology, and my PhD is actually in memory and aging. So I've taught a lot of courses on psych and aging. So I happen to know some things about sexuality over the lifespan. And one of those things is that men's psychology becomes more similar to women's psychology around sex and sexuality as they get older. Where am I going with this, and who reaches out to whom online? Young men are more than 10 times as likely as young women to reach out first. If you are a youngish person and you're heterosexual, if you're a youngish woman and he's not reaching out, let it go. You do not need to reach out to him. He's going to reach out if he's interested.
Let's assume they reach out to you and that's your comfort level. Just, particularly women a little older. How do you know who to respond to? What does the screening process look like, Duana?
Well, go back to your list. First of all, you wrote an ad that was about them, not about you. And your ad was so compelling that if they say, nice ad, you're not even responding to that. This ad is so specific that my sweetheart saw this ad. He was in the park when my picture showed up. I was on Match. He saw this ad. He thought, oh my gosh, it should have my picture under it. It's so specific. And he ran home. He was on a walk. He ran home and immediately, and he didn't say, hey, nice ad. What's up? He wrote a complete response that ended with saying that he felt like this was a great match. He couldn't wait to either meet me or talk with me. He hoped I would be in touch soon.
If I could share with our listeners, you have read that to me, what he responded to you with, and it was unbelievably responsive, factually specific, and grown up. So I get that you would respond to him. And it's a good thing you did, I might note, because it's turning out pretty well. But, I think there's some confusion as to how to respond. And then when you do respond and you feel there's a connection, what do you do to get offline and go to a phone call or email? How do you know when to take that step?
Yeah. So first of all, you're not going to take that step if someone has a deal breaker. So you've already got an ad that describes them very specifically. Then they write to you a very specific response. If they write something that's nebulous, hey, or how was your weekend, you don't even respond to that. You only respond to the people who answered in a sincere way that shows that they read your ad, and they should go point by point and say, here's how I fit it. I mean, your ad will be a clarion call. You have thrown down the gauntlet in a humorous and fascinating way, but you have thrown down the gauntlet, and they're going to respond likewise. The right guy is not going to see your ad and think, she's perfect for me. I'm just going to say, how was your weekend? He's not going to do that. First of all, you are screening for the person who answered your ad completely. Second of all, you're going to go then to their profile and you're going to look for any deal breakers. Notice that I didn't say look for similarities. You're going to look for any deal breakers on their profile, because when you answer them, it's either going to be the yes, I want to get to know you better script, or the no, I don't script. And I encourage you to have these both in a Word document or some kind of word processing document on your phone or your desktop so that you can send these things. You're going to send one of those responses. And if they have a deal breaker, you're going to send, hey, name, thanks so much for reaching out. I really appreciate that you took the time and effort to do that. I don't see that we have enough in common, but I really wish you great luck on your search.
Well, that goes back to our last episode. We spoke about asking the hard questions.
Yeah.
And I think at the point that you move to a phone call or an email, you got to ask the hard questions. Would you think about moving here? Do you want to get married? If you don't want to get married, I don't want to get married. You have to ask those hard questions when you move to that level. But I don't want our listeners to get the impression that the ads that are written, and I know when you do this work, you're playful and fun in the ads. I don't want our listeners to get the impression that this is a job description because that's, I want to share with our listeners that these ads, although they are fact specific and include must-haves, are written in a playful, flirtatious, fun way. There's a big difference. And I if you could just clarify that for us, that'd be great.
Yeah. So, first of all, they are a job description for the most important job in your entire life, the job that has more to do with your health, your wealth, your longevity, your sexuality, all kinds of life outcomes than anything else. So, no pressure.
That's a perfect example. When we are looking for a job, we go to professionals and resume writers and we screen and we edit. And then we just throw up a bunch of stuff about us. Share a little bit about your own ads, Wayne. That would be
Okay.
helpful.
And so I decided and I spent a long time writing my own ad. I love doing this. I love it so much. And, I was barely online, but that's why I like writing other people's ads because then I see the results with theirs. So I decided to write mine as if I were a casting director for a rom-com. My headline, and I put this on Match, but if I had been on like Hinge, I would have just put the first couple lines on because they don't let you put very much on Hinge. I would have put the first couple lines and then say, write to me for more. And then back channel, I would have shared the whole thing. In other words, you should have an ad even if you're on a swiping app. So I started with wanted co-star for fun rom-com starring your name here. Opening scene, Anne Hathaway, or another dark-eyed brunette with short hair, a winning smile, a discernible waist, fair skin, and a slender yet surprisingly strong build, ponders having introduced many happy couples and wanting the same for herself. Wondering where her own match is, she decides to place an online ad for the role of eventual boyfriend. And then the rest of the ad is a description of him. I'll just read some random descriptors.
Please.
Loves kissing. Doing several takes is a feature, not a bug. Likes calling and asking a girl on a date, so both of them can look forward to the fun they will have together. His courtship is from 1990, and she appreciates it and him. Enjoys hiking and walking several times a week. Bonus, if he has or likes dogs and will be kind to her cat. Has a relaxed relationship with food and weight. Our female lead is omnivorous and she does not own a scale. I said that because so many people are into all kinds of food things that I just don't want to be part of. He rarely or never uses drugs and alcohol. Like our female lead, our hero is high on life and eventually a whole lot of physical touch and quality time. This casting call expires on 1/30/21. If you're interested in this role, contact the casting director by responding to this ad and referencing which qualifications you possess. All good fit replies will be answered. I've really thrown down the gauntlet with this ad. It does not read like a job description. It's fun. It's compelling, if I do say so myself. And at the same time, if you say something like that and somebody comes back with, hey, babe, they're not your person. This says, this is a casting call. You've got 30 days to answer. I'm getting offline after that. And so, yeah, he ran back because he realized other people were going to answer this ad and he realized he was my person and he certainly is. So how do you move it back to your question, Pat, how do you move it finally from this back and forth? People tend to do this eternally. It seems eternal back and forth online, like they're going to be old fashioned pen pals. And this drives women crazy. They're waiting for the guy to ask for their number and he's not asking for their number. And they feel like, a lot of women who've read books that encourage being hard to get. I don't talk about hard to get anymore. I talk about high status, which means having self-respect and boundaries.
Self-respect. That's self-respect to follow your must-haves and not deviate. That's self-respecting. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's self-respecting. It's also self-respecting to say to yourself, you know what? Men don't value women they don't work hard to have. And so I'm going to be super, super friendly. And my book goes into great detail about how to do this because women get very confused about this. They seem to either vacillate between doing his quote unquote job for him and courting the guy or doing absolutely nothing, being an ice queen and wondering why the guy doesn't ever warm up. So it's neither of those things. It is having boundaries and self-respect while being super friendly and encouraging. That's what it is.
That's a tightrope. I mean, that's walking a tightrope. But I will tell you, when you learn to have self-respect and you learn to honor your must-have list, life changes. I could speak about that from personal experience. Your life changes because not that you necessarily find your person, but you know who you're not looking for. And that is life-changing. You don't waste time.
Yeah. And honestly, lots and lots of my clients have found the right person within a year, and quite a hefty percentage have found a person within 1 to 3 months. And part of that is, of course, they have to do the prep. I didn't tell you all the prep. That's in my book. We can't go into all that today, but they have to be mentally prepared before they start looking. That's a really good place to start. But when they're prepared and they start looking, they often find somebody fairly quickly because they don't get sucked into dead-end relationships anymore. And one of the ways they do that is they don't have pen pal relationships anymore. It's like a tennis game. If he serves, and again, especially if you're very young, he's more likely to serve. I know for sure evolution doesn't have an off switch. I know, for example, men continue being attracted to youth and beauty. Even if the guy's 80 years old, has a vasectomy, has all the kids he ever wants, has no interest in casting his genes forward anymore, been there, done that, he still wants somebody that he thinks is physically attractive, that doesn't have an off switch. And so that means that courtship also doesn't have an off switch. Men need to do the courting. It's how they know that they love us. It's how we know that they love us. So they need to
But our responses are critical.
Our responses are critical. So if a guy reaches out to you, and even in later life, when a man sees a woman he's really interested in, he's going to reach out. You don't have to go online and look for people to swipe right on or to choose. If you're a heterosexual woman, more of the time, he's still going to find you. But, if you're in your 60s, okay, maybe occasionally choose somebody, but that's it. Once you have indicated an interest, you step back and let him pick up the ball and carry it down the field from there. But let's say he did. He reached out, which look at it like a tennis game. He served, you return the serve. He served, you return the serve. He served. If on that third serve to fourth serve, if he didn't ask for your number, I want you to say, I'm really enjoying getting to know you here, but at this point, I'd really like to put a voice with your name. Here's my real name and my phone number so that you can Google me ahead of the call if you decide that's what you want to do. I would appreciate the same information about you if you're willing to give it. Hope to hear from you soon. Smiley face, done. If he continues,
and if he doesn't do it, you're done.
If he doesn't do it, you're done. Now, if he writes back and says, because there's still more strategy after this point, if he writes back and says, what time would you like me to call? Go ahead and answer that. But if he then acts as if you never spoke about a phone call, ignore him. Just move on with your life. Look, don't let anybody be more important to you than you are to them. That's not going to get you anywhere.
I don't necessarily, I agree with you about the volley, but I also think the quality of the volley matters, Duana, because there have been experiences with men who they enjoy the volley, but the volley is sort of a superficial volley. They never really dig deep. So I think the quality of the volley and the quality of the hopefully moving to the next level and the depth really matters. When you've been by yourself for a long time, the volley is something to look forward to. What I've learned is it's a lot more than that. It's what time would you like to speak? I had somebody in my life who said, let's FaceTime every time we spoke. That was very significant. You look at somebody, you see them, you get to know them differently. So the quality of the volley really matters, I believe.
Yes, it matters that they are paying attention to you and asking questions about you, and that they are escalating this to a call, not texting. In my book, I go into a lot of details about why not texting, why are phone calls much better. And just one reason why phone calls are better is players can't call everybody. They can text everybody. So you immediately jettison non-serious people out there when you request and require a phone call.
And be careful of the relationship that just texts emojis all day back and forth, because they're not deep and they're not substantive and they're not real. I mean, they just aren't. They're easy little things to send out. You really have to pay attention to the quality of the communication, I believe.
There are a number of problems with texting. One of them is you can be misconstrued so easily. Another one is it encourages players instead of real relationships. Another is you really don't get to know the person. You get to know people when they devote time specifically to you and talking with you. And let's say, and this is a problem that comes up a lot, women will say to me, but when I give him my number, aren't I chasing him? No, you are throwing down the gauntlet. You are refusing to be played. You're refusing to be his pen pal. You're basically saying, okay, call or don't, I'm out. You're doing it very nicely, but that's what you're doing.
That's control of your life.
Yeah, that's actually a high status move. Remember, I'm no longer really talking about being hard to get. I'm talking about having appropriate boundaries. There has never been a perfume called desperation, and there never will be. But good self-esteem, self-confidence, those things are sexy. Doesn't matter who you are. Those things are sexy.
Mature men want that, and they want to get to know you more. And you do filter out the less mature men or the attachment styles, which we'll talk about another time, by being confident, knowing what you want and being clear about it. It's not a weak move, it's a strong move. And I don't know if people understand that.
Yeah, it's a power move. You never meet the guy who brags that it was so easy to get his wife into bed, or, you meet guys who brag that, oh, well, she wasn't even that into me at first, but, I hung in there. And you want to throw down the gauntlet and say what I already said about requesting the phone call. Now, let's say that you do that. This drives my clients crazy. And he text messages you when you very clearly asked for a phone call. The only text message that you should be responding to is a text message that says, hi, this is whatever his name is. I just wanted you to know this is my number and my real name, and I'd like to call you tonight at such and such. Otherwise, you're not responding to a text message because
I agree with you.
yeah, you just said, I mean, think about who it is that you just said, I want to put a voice with a name, who then text messages you and doesn't escalate it. That guy either lacks intelligence, which we don't need, he lacks self confidence, which also is going to be hard on your life, or he has an avoidant attachment style and he's over there doing a version of, she isn't the boss of me, she can't tell me what to do. And he's not going to form a strong relationship with you. None of these things is workable.
And as you have said in the past, and you said in your last episode, well, it might be a little hurtful at that point, but boy, it'll save you a lot of hurt if you invest a lot of time and energy into this. So, it might be a little sting if it's been going on for a few weeks, but it's a hell of a lot more hurtful if you invest months and months of this and you never get satiated with the communication. You're left always looking for more. That's a bad sign. So I've learned that when you're always sort of anticipating and looking for more and not knowing if there's going to be communication, get out.
Yeah, when we talk about attachment styles, we'll really get into the nuts and bolts of
Yeah,
that.
we're going to do that in our next episode. I keep promising that, but I want to do this. I want to do this first because, how to is really important. People look for love online. So we're trying to tell them how to find it because that is the reality of life. The chances of meeting somebody, as you've said in the past, without that, it's limited. So we're trying to tell people these are the tools. You need a professional. Again, people spend fortunes on matchmaking sites. They're not doing this work. They spend fortunes on getting ready for the date, clothes, makeup, hair, but they don't invest in somebody to give you directions. I've tried to learn to surrender to professionals as I've gotten older and not try to figure everything out myself. You go to the doctor, you follow their advice. The mechanic, you follow their instructions. I do think it's the same thing about dating. And we never think about dating like that because people feel there's something clinical about it. I don't think so anymore. I used to.
I used to as well. You know my story. I was a dating train wreck. And so I decided to start learning about science for my own benefit. I never planned to turn into who it is I've turned into.
That's why you're great because you're so transparent about it. I was listening to our last episode and you said you were suddenly single or unexpectedly single. Yeah, that's the real world. And that's why you pick yourself up and you go forward.
Yeah.
But that's why you started this work.
Exactly. And I just wanted to make my own life easier, but it really has helped people all over the world now, which is a great privilege. I can't imagine something I would rather do than bring more love into the world. I love it so much. I get holiday cards every year from people who say, this baby wouldn't have been born, it wouldn't have existed if I hadn't worked with you, or I wouldn't have the love of my life if I hadn't read your book, or things like that. And it just makes my life, not just my week or my month. It's just that I feel so privileged to get to do what I do. And the thing is, there is no need to stumble around in the dark hoping that you find love and that it's like the lottery and that it's a 50-50 shot whether it works. It's not a 50-50 shot. Research shows that you can do really concrete and actually really simple things to completely transform who you choose and how your relationship goes. And why not do it?
And why not cast a wide net by doing it online? I think that if you have the tools, the knowledge, if you work with a professional, love is not only possible, I believe it will happen.
Yeah, it sounds simple. There are really only a couple things that you need in order to find the right person. One of those is knowing yourself. Another one is adhering rigidly to your boundaries of what you must have and saying no to everyone who doesn't fit them. And finally, say yes to someone who does. But there is a process getting there. That nutshell version, there's a lot of angst. People are emotional. I'm emotional. I do understand and feel a lot of compassion for people going through this because, of course, I've been through it and I've been through it more than once. I want people to have what they need. And the good news is you can have that. The bad news is if you're stumbling around hoping it just happens, there's a word for people who do that now, and that word is usually single.
So I want to conclude by letting our listeners know there's a difference between coaching and therapy. Best thing I ever did is got into really good therapy when my marriage ended. I still check in after 12 years. That's getting yourself partially mentally prepared. I look at coaching, though, as just follow directions because you have to know yourself. So there's two silos, therapy, understanding yourself, and sometimes just shut up and follow the directions because that gets you to your end result. So there's a difference between the two. And I think people don't understand that.
There is a big difference. In fact, when clients sign on with me, they sign a one-page document that says, I understand that Duana Welch has a PhD, but she is not a therapist and is not trained as one. I did not set out to become a therapist. Therapists, what they do is they try to help you understand and moderate your emotional life. It's very important. I have a therapist that I see. I really believe in therapy. I go to therapy. I love my therapist. Just think
So
the
do I
world.
love mine.
Yeah, just think the world of her. I encourage everyone who works with me, if they have the means, to please get therapy. Coaching is a different beast. With coaching, what you are getting is someone who strategizes given your particular circumstance. I'm going to talk about how I coach because I am not as familiar with other people's processes. To my knowledge, I'm the only person using science as the backbone of why I ask people to do the things I ask them to do. But it's very directive. Your therapist is not going to say, let me help you write your profile. Your therapist is not going to say, here are the right pictures to use. Your therapist is not going to say, here's how to deal with someone who said they were going to call, but then they didn't. Your therapist isn't going to talk about those things necessarily. They're looking at more overarching issues. And what I find is when a person can get coaching and therapy, you get really good outcomes from that. Therapy is basically retro parenting. It's the excellent parenting we all should have gotten and most of us didn't. And the healing that you get from a good therapist is absolutely legitimate. And I see life in many, many ways as both and. You can both get coaching and therapy. They're not the same thing, but they help you get the big result you want. Again, love is so often seen in our society as a nice add-on to your life. I will tell you this, for many people, it is your life. What else can you think of that literally affect how long you live, how your children do, and your grandchildren, by the way, how much sex you have and how good the quality of sex is. And by the way, if you think that living together and being married has the same quality of sex, you would be wrong. Married people have as much sex and they have a better quality of sex than cohabitors. And both of those groups have way more sex and better quality than people who are just dating. If you want something that's going to, Tom W. Smith, who used to be the head of the National Institute of Health here in the US, he said, if there was a product that you could buy that gave you better sex, better health, better job, longer life, your kids did better. If you sold that product, you'd be a billionaire. But you don't need to sell it because it already exists. It's called marriage.
And I think this is a good time to wrap up this episode. And I encourage you, if you want to find love online, I hope you listen to this and I hope you read Love Factually, 10 Proven Steps from I Wish to I Do, the new and updated version. Thank you, Duana. Look forward to continued discussions and appreciate your time today.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure.
So you've now found love online and you found your person. You may want to get married. You may not want to get married, but you're dating or you're living together. I urge you to be aware that there are legal consequences to every relationship. Be mindful of commingling money, co-signing loans, being on a lease together, having joint credit cards, joint cell phone accounts. We don't think about these things generally unless we're in a marriage, but dating or living together does raise legal issues. Something as simple as you're not married, your partner is in an accident, has broken bones, is in the hospital. If you don't have any legal documents executed, you may not be able to be in the hospital with him or her. We have to be aware that there are legal consequences to finding love anywhere, and we're going to continue to talk about that as we move forward in our episodes. Thank you so much for joining us today. Don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Please give us a 5-star rating and leave a review so more people can listen in to Heartbreak and Hope with Pat Barbarito.